Hello and welcome to the Hobby Breakfast Show. You're joined today by myself, the Mayor. We're also joined by Chef.
Hello.
Hello.
And by Sebastian, who is,
Eager.
that's Sebastian. Eager.
Eager.
Today we're going to do a quick preview of the Battle of Five Shires, which is a GBHL 90 event that we'll be attending in Worcester. Hosted by Liam and Laura Smith, and it's going to be a 34-player tournament, 6 rounds. It's a GBHL 90, as I've said. It's a 700-point tournament. You have to bring a good and evil force, so you're bringing 2 armies. It's just the generic sort of restrictions, so no impossible allies, but other than that, you're relatively free to do what you want. Now, the interesting thing with this one, some good versus evil tournaments, I imagine both of you might have played at them before, but the one I've been to, you were more or less guaranteed to play 3 of each side, and there was some weird matchmaking that had to occur to facilitate that. This one is different. Either through not being able to do that through Longshanks or by design. At the beginning of each game, it's essentially a 50-50 chance as to whether you play your good or evil army, and then your opponent will play the opposite. So it will still be good versus evil, but you might end up just playing your evil force for the whole tournament, or your good force, or anything in between that. So it's a 2-hour game, and I think one of the nicest rules that I enjoy anyway is the fact that you have a 10-minute timer at the end, so no one has to feel bad about the game ending. So, what do you two think about the events? What are your first thoughts, especially when... So, obviously we'll come to your lists later, but what were your initial thoughts when reading the rule pack for this one?
I was going to say, it basically reminded me of the Grand Tournament at Warhammer World, because that was a 700-point good and evil tournament, and that had, I think by the time this was posted, the Grand Tournament had just sort of finished in the last month or two, so I think it was kind of like I could actually have a look at the top 3 lists that did a good versus evil tournament for a similar amount of rounds as well. And I think like it's I always love good versus evil because it's always going to be the most sort of thematic, but I also think that it then skews a lot of lists towards, like a lot of players will look at certain armies and say, actually, that might not be as optimal as, say, this army because it's weak to most terror-causing armies, for example. So I think it might mean that we see more of certain armies because it's good versus evil. But you might also end up with a sort of rock, paper, scissors element to it where you think you know what people will bring, and then you bring the counter to what you think they will bring. It's kind of a bit circular.
Yeah. It's interesting. What sort of armies do you imagine would be popping up, do you think? What armies were coming into your head?
What do you think, Chef?
I think when we've discussed this over the past week or so, I said for good armies, I expect there to be quite a bit of Lake Town. I think just because at 700 points, it is quite popular and it allies quite well. And if you think about what armies might do well for evil at 700, I think you're going to want numbers, which Lake Town provides you, might as well, which it provides you. So I expect to see Lake Town a fair bit. I think we might see more elfish armies than I was initially expecting. I think there might be a few people that take elves, particularly Frandwill's Halls. I would be surprised if we see much Rivendell. Might get 1 or 2 Lothlorien. Maybe Gondor. I think Gondor might be quite prevalent because it just does everything fairly well at 700, doesn't it? You can fit Boromir in at 700, and you've got a ton of might, load of D7 everywhere, some higher fight value. So, yeah, I think Gondor and Rivendell will be the 2 armies sorry, not Rivendell. Gondor and Lake Town will be the 2 armies I expect to see the most of for the good side.
So, just on the scenarios, it's going to be the standard tournament setup. So there's 6 different pools. and it's rolled randomly, and everyone will play the same scenario each game. But I don't think the order of the pools is going to be standard. I think that will be random as well. So, I seem to be first in the slides that we have. So I'll briefly go through my lists, and then we'll go through Chef's, and then Sebastian's, and then we'll give ourselves some predictions for the event. So, the two lists I was originally going to be taking are not the two lists I'm going to be reading about here. Originally, I was going to be taking what they called Erebor Reclaimed, and I was going to be taking Isengard. But as I'm less familiar with those at this point than the armies I'm actually taking, I'm reverting to Goblin Town and to Return the King because it's GBHL 90, and I figured people will be trying fairly hard, I imagine. Goblin Town. I mean, what is there to say, really? It's the Goblin King, Grinner, Scribe, a Merc Captain with 8, and then 2 Captains, and it's 86 models. So, I mean, I really don't think there's much to say. I'm sort of just hoping that for my tournament run, in the kill stuff scenario pool, that I get the Return of the King, and everything else I don't really mind, but I prefer Goblin Town, basically.
So you've basically maximized on what evil is good at doing, and you've maximized on what good at doing in a way. So you could go either way. You could either get the 50-50 and it goes really well, but ultimately you could also get the 50-50 and it goes really badly.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, both lists, if you ran your whole event using either list, could have quite a good chance of doing well, because no matter the matchup, I'm pretty sure the Goblin Town will do quite well against every good army I can think of. Except for your good army, which is Army of the Dead. That might be a struggle for them. And then your good army is pretty good against most evil lists. Like, there's not a lot of high courage in the evil lists, and not a lot of evil heroes apart from some magic, which I think we might see a fair bit of. I think magic might be the sort of the crux of your list because of Aragorn.
Yeah, definitely. Chef knows a bit about that.
Yeah. I think actually as well, Lake Town might do okay against Goblin Town because you've got the higher fight value and you're not as low down on numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that's the only, as you say, your good army that you've got, Mayor, is perfect for Goblin Town. But I think also Lake Town would be a fairly the more difficult matchup for you, let's say.
Yeah, in the past I've struggled against Gondor and Lake Town the most, I would say. Elves, I feel very confident about playing against, and as there seems to be lots of elf lists, I'm kind of glad about that. So my Return of the King list is obviously Aragorn and the King. And then they've got very similar warbands, 7 warriors with shield spear, 4 with shields, 1 rider, and then Aragorn also has a warrior of the dead with banner, shield, and spear. Obviously, because while he acts as a banner, he doesn't banner himself, so I will have a banner following him around. I could have had the banner in the King of the Dead warband for the Maelstrom missions, but there's only 3 in the entire catalogue of scenarios. They're in different pools, but because there's a chance that I won't even be using this army in those pools, I figured it probably won't matter, and I'll just leave it in Aragorn's warband. So I feel more confident using these lists than the others. So those are my lists.
I think they're very strong.
Thank you.
I'll just put it out there. If I draw you and we're playing domination and you've got Goblin Town, I'm just going home. I'm sacking off the rest of the tournament. I'm not even bothering.
Yeah, I feel bad.
I would take the challenge. People will know why when they see my list.
So Chef, why don't we go through, let's start with your evil force.
Sure. I actually have you to thank for my evil force because of your bullshit rolling over the past month or so. Yeah, we played a few practice games using the army I was planning to take, which was Army of Gothmog, and I had the Troll Catapult in there just for fun. I actually did a fair few things in our games, but I don't think enough to make up the points that it was costing. So instead, I've now gone for a pure Mordor list with the Witch King as my leader, giving him the Crown of Morgul. Horse, I've given him 3 might, an extra free will, and 2 fate. I think that's enough based upon our game. I think with the Crown of Morgul, most of the things that I want to be casting are 3 or 4 plus. So if I've effectively got 2 dice roll of that, I should be casting it most turns. And if I really needed to go off, I just throw in the extra dice, as we did in our game the other week, where I sap wheeled Aragorn first turn and
on a
took
6.
all his will round 1,
Yeah, that was
which was
horrific.
very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think he actually did anything that whole game because I just transfixed him every turn.
No, yeah, I think he killed. Well, he helped on a heroic combat, but then that was it.
That was it. Yeah, which is quite nice. So yeah, then I've got Gothmog on a Warg with shield, Gurit, and Zagdush. Zagdush, he's okay. He's a very handy troop killer. If you're facing anything that's fight free, he can go up to strength 5 with 3 attacks, which is quite nice. Especially if he's near Gothmog and you're facing a man army. Like all of a sudden, he's now wounding on 4s if they're D7 or low, or even D6. And then beyond those heroes, it's a smattering of Moran and Orcs with shield and spear, or just with shield. I think I've got 38 models in total, and 12 might on the board. I think I'm quite happy with it. I mean, there's D6 pretty much everywhere. Good amount of might, a bit of magic in there. Yeah,
I think
it's a very strong, all rounder, isn't it? I suppose the only possible weakness is like the sort of lack of mobility, but even then you've got March, and like you can solve that quite easily just with the numbers you have.
Yeah, I agree. And like Guritz, I don't really need to use his might for anything else because of having Master of Battle with Gothmog.
Yes.
Which means, I can march if I need to using all 3 of Guritz's might, and then just hope that my opponent has to heroic move and I get it for free. So yeah, I think I agree with you. There's not really much mounted going on there between except for Gothmog and the Witch King, but I don't think I need it too much.
No.
We'll soon see. Yeah, so that's my evil side. Should I go on to the good list?
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, I really like the choice of Witch King because you're probably going to have juicier targets playing against good forces.
Yeah, those big heroes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, we saw that with Aragorn in our game, and actually, even playing Army of the Dead, he was quite useful in combat. I think he was in combat, I think twice, and he managed to kill 2 Army of the Dead warriors, which doesn't sound amazing, but given how difficult they are to take down, it's pretty handy. So, if I need to throw him into combat 1 turn, then he can still get through a few troops. That's why I gave him the 3 might, because if I'm gonna throw him into combat, then I'm gonna be wanting to be heroic combating so that I can maximize the amount of kills for 1 point of will. I think it's better to try and kill like 4 models in 1 turn and spend 1 will rather than try to do that over 2 turns and cost yourself 2 points of will. So yeah, that was the thinking there. Yeah, good list. I've gone for an army that I've used quite a lot now, which is Defenders of Helm's Deep.
Yeah,
I just like it. I think it's got a nice amount of variety, so I never find myself getting too bored with it. Because if I need to, I can play ultra defensive with shooting because of that 30-inch range. And I've got in this list, I've got Legolas with 10 Galadriel warriors, so plenty of shooting there. And if I need to be a bit more offensive, then I've got plenty of throwing weapons as well. So it allows me to play 2 different styles, and then I've got 2 heroes with heroic defense, so I can tie up a big hero if I need, which means Theoden doesn't really have to get stuck in against another big hero. He can just kind of quietly do his thing against other smaller heroes like captains or basic troops. So in terms of the heroes, I've got Theoden, I've got Haleth, I've got Gamling with the banner, and then I've got Legolas. And then beyond that, it's just a usual smattering of Rohan warriors, Royal Guard with like throwing spears, and then the 10 Galadrim with bow, but also with spear. Because once you get into combats, it's handy to have that fight 5 in the back row, just giving you that fight value buff where you need it. So that's a total of 40 models. Only 10 might compared to my evil list, which is surprising, but I've got 12 bows in there, and I guess Gamling's like auto regen on the might.
Yeah, it's very strong as well. It's just got a lot of models for a good list, I think, and with the heroes you've got in there, it's just it's just got a bit of everything. A little kind of like a toolbox list. You've got Legolas to try and snipe out horses. He can also go for wins on leader, or those like magic casters that are causing you an issue. All the throwing weapons is pretty good against evil armies, I'd say, because most evil armies won't try to be that shooty, I don't think. Mostly because of blinding light being an issue for, a lot of good lists can get blinding light quite easily. So I think people are less likely to take crossbow spam, and and Harad lists I think might not be quite so keen to try and spam bows as much, because you'll also outrange them with the 30-inch range.
I can kind of guarantee myself like two turns of unopposed shooting. Which even if you're hitting on 6s, probably with 12 shots you're going to get a couple of hits, and I guess it forces your opponent to come to you. So it's quite a nice position to be in. And as you say, with Legolas, you can pretty much guarantee that especially against evil armies, that you're going to get a wound on the leader, because most of them are going to be one fate, right? And Legolas can shoot into combat. So if they're coming across the board to you and you've got 3-4 rounds of unopposed shooting and then 3 or 4 rounds of combat, that's Legolas is going to be hitting, let's say, 6 out of those 7 turns. And then if you need to spend a might or 2, you just do it. So it's a really nice position to be in. I've always found that when I'm playing against Legolas, it's just an immediate concern for my leader. Especially, like if you've got, in the past I've used Bulk quite a lot, and you think, right, I have to get him into combat, but also his wild can get shot down, or he can get wounded quite easily. If like Legolas rolls a 2+ and then rolls a 5, he's mighting it for a 6, and then you've got to spend your fate roll. If you roll that 1, then you're out of might like turn 1.
Yeah. So
it's a really nasty like model to face against. So I really like having him in the army. As I think some people take Gimli, but I just think Legolas is for me is a bit of a no-brainer in that list, because it's got so much shooting and so many throwing weapons.
And I was gonna say, I think you've got the models to justify it, because in Mayor's list, if you took Legolas with all of the Army of the Dead, it does take out 6 warriors, and suddenly you're down to almost 20 models instead of 30. Whereas in your list, you've got 40 models with Legolas, so it kind of just means he's got that support around him, and he's not as vulnerable to sort of being flanked around and stopping him from shooting anyway.
I think he's just a psychologically damaging model to see. As soon as you put your army on the board, it's like, okay, I've got to deal with it. Like that, there's nothing really you can do to stop it, unless you're going to put your hero at the back of the board out of sight. Which, if your opponent's doing that, then that's a win for you already. So, really nice model to have.
Awesome.
Nice.
Sebastian, would you like to go through your evil force first?
Yeah, sure. So for my evil list, I am taking the Host of the Dragon Emperor. Boo. It's 32 models. Nothing particularly surprising about the list. It's essentially the choice of Dragon Emperor Legion was, as we've said before, to get that fight 5, because my gut feeling was that most people would think, oh, I'm not going to take elves. Fight 5 is overkill. I'm going to take a bunch of Gondor stuff at fight 4. That should be plenty to deal with any evil list, really. So I was thinking, well, get the fight 5, give those good lists a good show. And even if I do come across elves, at least it could be a drawn combat, and therefore there's still a role. Granted, there's no mass elven made weaponry for the Easterlings, but like it's not an automatic win. Like having played elves a lot, and I've used elves against these Easterlings a fair bit. You don't always win those roll-offs, and being defense 6 across the board with Easterlings against elves, unless they're two-handing, they're still only killing you on 6s. And Easterlings have a little advantage as well because they get a much larger banner. So 9 times out of 10, elves only take 1 banner, and that's only going to help you with like half of the force. So Easterlings will cover the other half and get the extra dice. And with this list in particular, there are 6 acolytes. So you've got 2 attacks at the front, supported with 2 pikes, that's 4 dice. With the banner reroll, that's 5 dice to try and get the 6. And my opponent's likely only going to have 2 dice unless they're spamming Guard of the Gladwin Court with fight 6 and having pikes there. But in which case, you just kind of redistribute the pikes to fight somebody else. So yeah, it's basically the heroes that are taking it is the Dragon Emperor, Rutabi, and an Easterling Dragon Knight on horse. I picked the Dragon Knight over Brorgear because I felt like having that extra fight 6 hero would be really helpful against like your Faramirs and those other kind of like heroes that you might see across the table. And they're just a bit more of a threat than Brorgear is. Brorgear can be a little bit whiffy sometimes if you don't roll really well with the magic. And I just felt like 80 points was actually quite a lot for him in this kind of matchup, in this format.
I've used him a few times myself, and if the magic works, he is very effective. Like that tremor can be brilliant.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's fight free with 1 attack. If for some reason you're in combat with him, he's going down quite easily. So I think, as much as I like him, I think you've probably made the right decision with dropping him.
Yeah, I just think having that mounted threat with this army kind of like gives you just a little bit of punch. I mean, the Dragon Emperor is leading 14 Black Dragon warriors, a pikes and shield, and a drum. Just to get them where they need to go as quickly as possible, get the Emperor into position. Rutabi's leading 6 acolytes and 2 warriors with pikes, and then the Dragon Knight is leading 2 cataphracts. I've given them a weapon swap, so I'll give them some axes to get some strength 4. And then he's also got 4 Easterlings with pike and shields, just because they're still free at grades in the Dragon Knight's warband. Just another reason why I had the Dragon Knight instead was just to get those extra couple points. Otherwise, most of the lists I was making was only 31 models, so it gives me an extra bit of leeway with the break point.
I like the choice of Dragon Knight. I think it's cool.
Yeah, the thing is, it's just way more fun to use. Honestly, like Brorgear is great, but like there's a lot of thinking involved and like making sure he's in the right position, who's going to be able to resist, how many dice do I throw at it? Like it's just a lot of faff. But with the Dragon Knight, it's like, well, I can see a captain there. I'm going to go kill him and use Blood and Glory and get some might back, and it's just a bit more fun. So yeah, that's my evil list. And then for my good list, I'm going to be taking something I've not ever used before. I've never ever played, and I still haven't even finished painting them. It's the Riders of Theoden. Originally, I made the list which had Theoden, Dernhelm, and Gamling with banner, and just Royal Guard and Riders, which was I think about 29 models. And I was like, that's quite cool and quite themey and scary because 30 cavalry models is quite a lot. But having had lots of discussions with Mayor about using the might points for heroic moves all the time, and having that many models actually can be a sort of hindrance because you're never going to have that full force of your army against your opponent because you haven't got the pikes or the spears,
or the base size.
Yeah, the base size is just not going to allow you to really do that, and you're going to have a lot of guys in reserve, or you're spending lots of time going around the flanks, and it doesn't quite work how you want it to work. So I tweaked it, and I've gone a lot more hero heavy, which seems to be doing quite well at a lot of other local tournaments. Granted that they're not good versus evil, and I think they were smaller points. But the army is as follows: it's 12 models. It's got Theoden, of course. He has 2 Rohan Royal Guard with a throwing spear, and then it's just Eomer, Marshal of the Riddermark. He's on his horse, has a shield, but not leading anybody. He's just by himself. And then Gamling, he's got his banner and 1 Rohan Royal Guard to sort of keep him company. Then we've got Deowine and Elfhelm. Elfhelm also has a Royal Guard with him. That's because Elfhelm's only fight 4. So the charging Rohan Royal Guard will get fight 5. So if he needs a bit of help, then the Rohan Royal Guard is there for the fight value. And then it's Dernhelm and a captain of Rohan who has a shield and heavy armor. So so the 12 models total, and I thought about dropping the 4 Rohan Royal Guard to have 9 models and just have an extra captain. But I think I need those kind of throwaway models, or those tagging objectives, or if it's recon, those guys could easily kind of flank round and try and just be a nuisance without too much sacrifice. But the idea of the list is just to kind of go, right, we're going to call death on this turn. We're going to break my opponent as quickly as possible, take out any key targets. Because if my opponent's playing Witch King, for example, then they're probably going to be behind 2 lines of Morannon Orcs or something similar, or Black Numenorians with Morannons. This list kind of just doesn't care about that. It will just charge into the 2 with every hero and go, right, I'm going to do combat, maybe a strike in the combat sort of combination. We're going to punch through, and then the Witch King's just kind of there by himself. It's just meant to kind of be all of my army is going to kill a third of your army on the first turn, and then all my army is going to charge and kill another third of your army, and then by that point, hopefully, it's just too late.
Yeah, it's a fun army though. Like on that turn when you call death and it does go off, your opponent's going to feel like shit. You're going to feel amazing.
I've had it done to me, so it's my turn now.
Yeah.
But yes, okay. I am just hoping, fingers crossed, that I can get this finished in time. I was working on it just before we started the podcast, and I'm sure I'll be working on it later this evening.
Well, let's do some predictions then. So, I don't know whether we'll send this out for the tournament or if it will be part of the review as well, but let's go down the list. So we'll go down in columns. So we'll start with the predictions for myself. I'll predict myself last. Chef, what would you like to predict? So 6 games.
I can easily see you winning all your Goblin Town matches. So I'm going to go.
I might never play them.
I was going to say
you might never play them. This is, but also your good list is also strong. I'm going to go for 1-1 for you.
I will take that, Sebastian.
I reckon you're going to play 4 games with Goblin Town and 2 with the other. So I reckon you'll win 5 and lose 1.
Wow, that is very kind. I'm going to be less kind to myself. I think it's going to be 3 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses.
Ooh.
I think there's some big competition out there, and the unpredictability of the event will no doubt get to me. So my prediction for Chef, I think he's got 2 very solid lists. I'm going to give Chef 4-1-1 because I think there's still that random element where you can have a bad matchup, but also I think you'll tough out a lot of games. They'll be very close.
By bad matchup, do you mean I end up getting drawn against you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
We'll draw, no doubt. Sebastian, your prediction for Chef?
I was also thinking for 1-1, but to make it interesting, I will say. I will say. This is tricky. I'm going to say 4-2 because I think he'll come up against, like Dewey with something random, and it'll just kind of throw you off. I think you'll have a bad matchup, and it'll just make you have that one extra loss.
I mean, I've never beat Dewey, so you're very, very justified in that
How many
comment.
times have you played him?
In solo tournaments, I think I faced him twice, and then I faced him in the doubles. So not that many, but I've not even come close to beating him, unfortunately.
And your prediction for yourself?
I'm going to go again purely based on the random nature, and I think they're both fairly well-rounded armies, but there are weaknesses. There are scenarios and matchups that it could do bad against. So I'm going to go 3-2-1.
That's 2 draws, yeah?
Yes.
Cool. Right, my prediction for Sebastian. You haven't used the Rohan very much, but
I've also only used Easterlings in one tournament, but I did come second in that
you
tournament.
did come second, so I think because like if it was a really good list, but you were a lesser player, I would have thought that you'd do less well. But because you're actually quite a good player, the fact that you're not that experienced with the list doesn't actually concern me very much. So I'm going to predict you 4-2.
Oh, that's generous.
Chef, your prediction for Sebastian?
I agree with the comments about Sebastian being a good player. I think
you might not afterwards.
Despite the Dewey comment, I think just because of the Rohan list being short on numbers, if you're doing recon or domination against Goblin Town or something like that, it's pretty much an auto loss, isn't it? So
well, the thing is, he's got so few models that he can chew through models very quickly as long as he positions properly and break them very quickly, and then it's just a case of
waiting you to run away.
But you're forgetting one key thing, right? If he's facing Goblin Town, then the Goblin King hurls.
Yeah, dismounts everything.
Exactly. If your models get dismounted, you're in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to go 3-1-2, 3 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses.
That's fair.
And Sebastian,
I am going to be really honest, and I think I'm going to be going 2-1-3.
Wow. Well, so all of them were positive apart from that very last one. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Yes. Well, we're all very excited, and we'll see how our lists do and how we do. And we'll see you in the review. Is there anything else you two would like to talk about?
No, just very much looking forward to it, and I know that Leon's also doing a couple of extra sort of hobby award things, which will be nice because I know that in Worcester especially there's a lot more people taking hobby related stuff. Like there's been a load of cool display boards people have brought recently, and looking forward to what other people have sort of brought. But I'm also sort of very cautious because I think this is one of the most competitive Worcester events we've been to for a while because it's a GBHL 90. So I'm hoping that it's not going to be too too much. Like I'd rather have like a more fun games, even if I lose more games. I'd rather sort of end up on the latter half of the tournament to sort of enjoy it a bit more than start sweating because it's at the top.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just for me though.
For me, I'm going to say to anyone listening, bookmark this because I know I can see it coming. I'm going to get drawn against Mayor. He's going to be using Goblin Town, and I'm going to somehow still fail to beat him. Bookmark that. Ready for the
In
review.
tournament games, you're owed a win. I'm 2 wins up. Sorry, not 2 wins up. I'm 1 win up. I beat you twice in tournaments, and you beat me once.
Yeah, the 2 games you beat me actually were both with Goblin Town in domination. Funny enough. It's absolute bullshit.
Really?
I think I said this on the last video we did, but like every time I've played Goblin Town, I think apart from 1 game, so that's I think 7 out of 8 times I've played Goblin Town, it's been in domination. It's absolutely uncanny. So I can see I've got no reason to expect that won't happen again this tournament.
Exciting. Can't wait to be matched up. Good. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I've been Mayor. I've been joined by Sebastian.
Thanks very much. Bye bye.
And Chef.
Bye everyone.
See you next time.